Let me take it off first. The rancher froze. Then, she was his bride. Wild West stories. Most days, the streets were empty except for the occasional horse-drawn wagon or a few townsfolk moving about with their daily errands. Sam Carter, a rugged and hardworking rancher, had lived in Redstone all his life. He knew every inch of his land, every cow in his herd, and every corner of the ranch he had inherited from his father. The ranch was more than just property. It was a home, a livelihood, and a responsibility he could not take lightly. Sam had grown used to the solitude that came with his work. His days began before sunrise, tending to the animals, checking fences, and making sure the land was in order. Nights were quiet and long, filled with the sounds of the wind against the old wooden walls of his cabin and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. One late afternoon in early autumn, the sky grew heavy with dark clouds. A storm was rolling in, faster than the usual seasonal winds. Sam was in the barn, repairing a broken fence, when he noticed the first drops of rain falling. He knew he needed to finish his work quickly if he wanted to secure the animals before the weather turned worse. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant lightning. Sam worked fast, his hands moving skillfully, but even with his experience he could not control the storm. By the time he finished checking the last gate, the rain had begun in earnest, drumming against the tin roof of the barn. As he trudged back to the cabin, his boots sinking into the mud, he noticed something unusual on the trail leading to his home. A figure was struggling through the rain, carrying a small bundle close to their chest. Sam's first instinct was caution. It was rare for anyone to be traveling in such weather, and even rarer for strangers to come to Redstone unannounced. Yet something about the figure moved with purpose and urgency. Sam slowed his pace, squinting through the sheets of rain. The closer the figure came, the more he could make out. A young woman, soaked to the bone, her clothes clinging to her, but she moved steadily, refusing to falter despite the storm. When she reached the cabin, Sam opened the door before she even knocked. "Come in quick," he called, his voice steady but alert. She stepped inside, shivering, and for a moment Sam simply looked at her. She was unlike anyone he had seen in the quiet town, her eyes bright and alert, her movements confident even though the rain had drenched her completely. She smiled faintly as if embarrassed and said, "Thank you, I didn't know where else to go." Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of exhaustion beneath it. Sam quickly lit the fireplace, the flames crackling and sending warmth through the small cabin. The scent of burning wood mingled with the damp smell of rain that clung to her clothes. He gestured toward a chair near the fire. "Sit down, you're freezing," he said. She obeyed, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to absorb the warmth. Sam fetched a dry blanket and handed it to her. She accepted it with a small nod, draping it over her shoulders. The cabin was modest but comfortable, filled with the simple furniture of a life lived close to the land. There were signs of care and routine everywhere. Cooking utensils neatly hung, shelves lined with supplies, and a few personal touches like a faded photograph of Sam's parents. As the fire warmed the room, Sam finally asked, "What brings you out here in such a storm?" She hesitated for a moment, then said, "I was traveling west, trying to find work, a place to start over. I didn't mean to intrude." Sam nodded slowly. It wasn't unusual for people to leave their old lives behind and head west, but most did not wander into the middle of a storm without planning. There was something brave, almost stubborn, about this woman. "You picked a bad night to be on the trail," he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. She smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his. "I didn't have much choice," she replied simply. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the rain hammering against the roof. Sam studied her, noting the determination in her posture and the way she tried to make herself comfortable despite being soaked and cold. She introduced herself as Clara. Sam noticed the way she carried herself, independent, self-reliant, yet there was a softness in her demeanor that suggested a hidden vulnerability. It was that mix that made Sam freeze for a moment. Something about Clara made him pause in a way he hadn't in years. He shook his head slightly, clearing the thought. It wasn't the time to be distracted. There was a storm outside and a person in need inside his cabin. After a while, Clara took off her wet coat, carefully folding it and placing it near the fire to dry. Sam found himself momentarily speechless, not because of her appearance, but because of the quiet confidence she displayed. It was rare for someone to step into his life with such composure, and yet she did it without demanding anything, without asking for more than shelter from the storm. That simple act of removing her coat, small as it seemed, left an impression on him. He realized that he had spent so many years alone, surrounded by cattle and fences, that he had forgotten how it felt to be in the presence of someone so self-assured. The storm raged through the night, but inside the cabin there was a sense of calm. Sam and Clara shared a simple meal of bread and stew, the warmth of the food and the fire contrasting sharply with the cold and wet outside. They talked quietly, sharing small details about their lives. Sam learned that Clara had traveled from a distant town, searching for a fresh start after losing her family farm. She spoke of challenges and hardships, but also of hope and determination. Sam found himself listening intently, realizing that her strength and resilience were qualities he deeply admired. By the time the storm began to subside, Clara had dried off and rested enough to regain her composure. Sam noticed a subtle change in the room. The tension from earlier had eased into something more comfortable. There was a sense of trust beginning to form between them, fragile but undeniable. He realized that the night had brought not only shelter from the storm, but also the start of an unexpected connection. Before leaving for bed, Sam looked at Clara and said, "You can stay here as long as you need. The storm will pass, and when it does, we can figure out your next step." She nodded, grateful, and for the first time since her journey began, she felt a sense of relief and safety. That night, as Sam lay awake listening to the remnants of the storm outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that Clara's arrival had changed something. It wasn't just the storm that had brought her to his doorstep. It was the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted, a story that would challenge them, connect them, and ultimately transform their lives in ways they had never imagined. The first night passed quietly, but the events of that evening lingered in both their minds. Clara had entered Sam's life like the storm itself, sudden, unexpected, and powerful in its presence. Sam, usually so steady and controlled, found himself thinking about her long after the fire had dimmed. For Clara, the warmth of the cabin and the kindness of a stranger offered a glimpse of hope, a reminder that even in the harshest places, people could find safety and compassion. Little did they know, the encounter at the cabin was only the first chapter in a journey filled with challenges, friendship, and perhaps something deeper. The ranch, the storm, and the small town of Redstone would become the backdrop for a story neither of them could have planned. A story that would test their courage, their hearts, and ultimately, their ability to trust in one another. And so, as the night wore on and the rain finally faded into the soft sound of dripping water and gentle wind, both Sam and Clara settled into uneasy but hopeful sleep, unaware that this night would mark the beginning of a life-changing connection. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the ranch drenched but calm. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting a soft glow on the fields, turning each blade of grass into tiny spears of gold. Sam rose early, as he always did, and moved quietly through the cabin so as not to wake Clara. He brewed a strong pot of coffee and prepared a simple breakfast of eggs and bread, the aroma filling the small kitchen. When Clara finally stirred, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, she was greeted by the warm smell and the soft light. "Good morning," Sam said, offering a nod that was both polite and cautious. She returned the greeting with a shy smile, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. After breakfast, Clara helped Sam gather the tools needed to repair the damaged fence along the northern edge of the ranch. Sam had spent years maintaining these fences, knowing that a single broken post could allow cattle to wander into dangerous areas. Clara followed him closely, learning the work quickly. Her hands, though small, were steady as she helped lift and secure wooden planks. Sam observed silently, impressed by her ability to adapt so quickly. She didn't complain, even when the wind carried bits of rain and dirt into their faces. Instead, she smiled, laughing softly when a stubborn nail refused to stay in place. That laughter was a sound Sam hadn't realized he missed, and it made him feel strangely at ease. As they worked, Clara shared small bits of her past. She spoke of her family farm, lost after a series of misfortunes that left her with no choice but to leave. Sam listened quietly, offering nods and the occasional word of understanding. Her story wasn't unusual in the harsh life of the West, but the calm strength in her voice made it clear that she had endured much and survived. He admired that resilience. For her part, Clara noticed how Sam worked methodically, never rushing, always careful to do things correctly. She saw a man who was deeply connected to his land, someone who respected life in every form, from the smallest plant to the largest animal he cared for. By mid-morning, the fence repair was nearly complete. Sam paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked at Clara. "You're good with your hands," he said, "better than most who come through here." She chuckled, a sound that carried warmth even on the cool morning air. "I had to learn early," she replied. "Life doesn't wait for anyone, especially out west." Sam nodded, understanding the truth in her words. There was something about her that made even the ordinary tasks of ranch life feel different, lighter, almost enjoyable. After finishing the repairs, they moved on to feeding the cattle. Sam opened the gate, letting the herd out into the grazing area. Clara followed, scattering feed and helping to guide the animals. She laughed as one particularly stubborn cow tried to wander off, gently nudging it back with her shoulder. Sam watched from a short distance, the corner of his mouth lifting in a small smile. He felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a mixture of admiration and something he couldn't quite name. Clara, noticing his glance, met his eyes briefly and then looked away with a faint blush. The moment passed, but the awareness of it lingered between them. Later in the afternoon, the work slowed, and they returned to the cabin for a brief rest. Clara sat by the fire, drying her hands and brushing stray strands of wet hair from her face. Sam poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "You've done well today," he said, his voice softer than before. "I didn't expect anyone to handle this much work, especially under these conditions." Clara smiled, a mixture of pride and humility. "I don't like sitting idle," she admitted. "There's always something to do, something to learn." Sam felt a pang of surprise. Her words reflected not only diligence but also intelligence and thoughtfulness. He realized he had underestimated her at first, thinking she was just a stranger who happened to stumble into the storm. Now he saw her for what she truly was, a capable, independent woman who could match him in skill and determination. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the cabin and fields, Sam decided it was time to check the water troughs. Clara accompanied him, carrying a bucket of fresh water. As they walked side by side, Sam noticed how comfortable he felt with her presence. There was a quiet rhythm to their movements, a sense of harmony that made even the simplest task feel meaningful. When they reached the troughs, Clara bent down to refill them and Sam paused, watching her carefully. She moved with ease, her actions deliberate and confident. He realized almost suddenly that he was beginning to care about her more than he expected. That evening, after all the work was done, they sat outside on the porch, looking at the fading light of the sky. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Sam broke the silence first. "You've handled yourself well today. I didn't expect anyone to do so much work, let alone keep up with me." Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the orange glow of the sunset. "I like to keep busy," she replied softly, "and I enjoy learning new things." "You have a lot to teach, Sam." He felt a strange warmth at the sound of his name on her lips, a familiarity that shouldn't exist yet somehow did. For a long while, they spoke quietly about the land, the cattle, and the routines of ranch life. Sam found himself opening up in ways he rarely did, sharing stories of his father and the lessons learned on this ranch. Clara listened attentively, occasionally offering a thoughtful comment or a smile that seemed to encourage him to continue. There was a rhythm to their conversation, a growing connection that neither could ignore. Even when the night grew darker and stars appeared in the clear sky, they continued talking, seated on the wooden porch with only the sounds of distant cattle and the gentle wind around them. Later, inside the cabin, Clara began to tidy up, putting away tools and preparing a small dinner. Sam observed her from across the room, noticing how her movements were precise but graceful. At one point, she reached to remove her wet boots, and Sam's hand froze mid-motion. There was something about the way she moved, so self-reliant and unafraid, that left him momentarily speechless. It wasn't just her appearance, it was her presence, her confidence, and the way she seemed entirely comfortable in the world, even as a newcomer. Sam realized he had rarely felt this way about anyone in his life. As they ate their meal, Sam found himself thinking about the future. Clara had arrived by chance during a storm, but he couldn't shake the feeling that her presence was more than coincidence. She brought energy and life to the ranch, and her determination and kindness made him reflect on his own life, his solitude, and what he might be missing. Clara, for her part, was beginning to feel a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. The ranch, the work, and the quiet strength of Sam all combined to create a place where she felt safe, appreciated, and seen. That night, as the fire burned low and the cabin grew quiet, Sam and Clara settled into their respective corners. Sleep came easily, but neither could ignore the growing awareness that something had shifted. The connection between them was subtle yet undeniable, built on shared work, mutual respect, and the small moments that marked the day. Both understood that this was only the beginning of a story that neither could predict, a story that would test their patience, courage, and hearts in the days to come. Before sleep took full hold, Sam looked over at Clara one last time. She was quietly reading by the dim firelight, her face calm and determined. He realized that her presence, though recent, had already begun to leave a lasting impression on him. For Clara, the warmth of the cabin and the kindness of Sam offered a sense of comfort and hope. Neither could have known how their journey would unfold, but both felt the faint stirring of something new, an understanding that life could change suddenly, sometimes for the better when least expected. And so, as the night deepened, the ranch rested under the calm sky. The wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it the promise of new challenges, new friendships, and perhaps new beginnings. For Sam and Clara, the day had been more than just work and survival. It had been the start of a connection that would shape the days, weeks, and months to come. A connection neither of them could ignore, even if they tried. The days that followed were filled with work, learning, and slowly, a growing closeness between Sam and Clara. The morning sun would rise over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Sam would already be up, tending to the cattle. Clara had settled into a routine as well, following him into the fields, helping wherever she could. Every day brought new tasks, mending fences, checking the water troughs, feeding the animals, and walking the pastures to make sure none of the cattle had strayed. Sam watched her carefully, noticing how she adapted quickly to the demanding life of a rancher. She never complained, even on days when the sun burned hot and the work seemed endless. Her resilience reminded him of the strength he had admired in his own father, and he found himself respecting her more with each passing day. It was during these long days in the open fields that their friendship began to deepen. Sam, who had rarely shared personal stories with anyone, found himself opening up to Clara. He spoke of his childhood on the ranch, of lessons learned from his father, and of the difficulties of managing the land alone. Clara listened with careful attention, asking thoughtful questions, sometimes offering small pieces of advice or suggestions. Her insight surprised him on more than one occasion. She had a sharp mind, but her words were gentle and never overbearing. Sam began to realize that Clara was more than a visitor seeking shelter. She was someone who could understand his life, someone who could walk beside him in the challenges he faced. Clara, too, began to reveal more about herself. She spoke of her journey from the distant town where she had grown up, explaining the hardships that forced her to leave home. She described the struggles of managing a small farm, the difficulties of losing family members, and the determination it had taken to keep going despite it all. Sam listened without interruption, occasionally nodding, feeling a sense of admiration for her perseverance. Her past was marked with trials, yet she carried herself with an unshakable confidence. She had learned to rely on her own strength, and yet she was humble and kind, always aware of the needs of others. One afternoon, while they were repairing a section of the fence that had been damaged by a recent storm, Clara accidentally dropped a hammer into the mud. Sam reached to pick it up, but she insisted on retrieving it herself. "I've got this," she said with a smile, and her hands quickly and efficiently pulled the hammer free. Sam watched, frozen for a moment, not because of the simple act, but because of the quiet determination and independence she displayed. It was a small moment, yet it left a deep impression on him. Clara was capable, strong, and yet gentle, qualities he had rarely seen combined in one person. As the days grew longer and the work continued, Sam and Clara found comfort in the small routines of ranch life. They shared meals, washed dishes together, and repaired tools side by side. Each task, no matter how mundane, became an opportunity to connect. Sam noticed that he looked forward to Clara's presence more than he expected. Her laughter, her careful attention to the animals, and the way she seemed to notice the smallest details of the ranch all made him feel alive in a way he had not felt in years. Clara, in turn, found herself appreciating Sam's steady nature. He was patient, strong, and capable, yet there was a softness beneath the rugged exterior, a gentleness that only revealed itself in small gestures, like offering her the best seat near the fire or checking that she had enough water after a long day. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, they decided to take a break from the long day and sit by the creek that ran along the edge of the property. The water sparkled in the fading sunlight, and the air was filled with the soft chirping of crickets. Sam leaned against a tree, throwing small pebbles into the water, while Clara picked wildflowers along the bank, occasionally letting out a soft laugh when a bee came too close. "You have a good eye for flowers," Sam remarked, watching her carefully arrange them. Clara smiled. "I like finding beauty in simple things," she said. "Life is hard enough without missing the small joys." Sam nodded, realizing that her words reflected the philosophy she had carried through all her struggles. He admired her even more for it. That night back at the cabin, they shared a quiet dinner. The firelight flickered across the wooden walls, casting shadows that danced like old memories. Sam noticed how comfortable he felt in Clara's presence. She didn't just fill the silence, she made it meaningful. They spoke about their dreams, not just of work, but of the lives they hoped to build. Clara confessed that she had always longed for a place to belong, a home where she could contribute and be accepted for who she was. Sam, without realizing it, admitted that he had spent years running the ranch alone, but that he had sometimes wondered what it would be like to share it with someone who understood him. The conversation lingered in the air, unspoken feelings beginning to form between them. The days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life at the ranch became familiar and comforting. Sam and Clara worked tirelessly, often staying out in the fields from dawn until the sun sank behind the hills. They laughed together, shared meals together, and slowly their bond strengthened. Sam found himself looking at Clara in ways he hadn't looked at anyone before. Her presence brought light into his life, and he began to realize that the isolation he had grown used to was no longer necessary. Clara, too, felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced in years. She trusted Sam, relied on him, and began to imagine a future where they could face challenges together, rather than alone. One afternoon, a minor accident tested their trust and cooperation. A calf had gotten its leg caught in a fence, struggling and panicking. Sam rushed over, but Clara was already there, calming the animal with soft words while helping him free it. Their movements were synchronized, almost instinctively, each knowing what the other needed to do. When the calf was finally safe, Sam looked at Clara and felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. She had remained calm under pressure, her courage and intelligence shining through. Clara, catching his gaze, saw the respect and perhaps a hint of something deeper reflected in his eyes. As the sun set that evening, they sat outside once again, exhausted but content. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the ranch lay quiet except for the soft sounds of the animals settling for the night. Sam finally spoke, breaking the comfortable silence. "You've been incredible these past weeks," he said. "I've seen few people who can handle all this work and still have the patience and kindness you show." Clara smiled, a gentle warmth spreading across her face. "I've had to be strong," she replied softly. "Life out here doesn't forgive weakness easily. But you've made it easier to endure." His heart skipped a beat at her words, a subtle acknowledgement of the connection forming between them. Night fell, and the cabin glowed softly with firelight. Sam and Clara moved about, finishing chores and preparing for bed. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a closeness that had grown naturally from shared work, conversations, and quiet moments. Sam noticed the way Clara moved, independent and confident, yet gentle in her interactions. He felt drawn to her in a way he couldn't fully explain. Clara, in turn, felt a warmth in Sam's presence, a trust and admiration that had grown steadily over the past weeks. As they prepared to sleep, Sam reflected on the changes these past weeks had brought. Clara's arrival had disrupted his solitary life, but in doing so, it had also brought a sense of companionship he hadn't realized he craved. He felt hope, something he hadn't felt in years. Clara, lying awake in her corner, thought about the life she was beginning to build here, the trust she had in Sam, and the strange comfort she found in this rugged, quiet place. Both of them, in their separate thoughts, recognized that their bond had grown beyond simple friendship. Something deeper was forming, a connection neither could ignore. And so, under the quiet night sky, with the stars twinkling above and the ranch settling into calm, Sam and Clara drifted to sleep, each carrying the sense that their lives had been changed in a profound way. The days ahead promised work, challenges, and trials, but also the chance to explore the connection they had found in each other, a connection built on respect, trust, and the small joys of life on the ranch. The story of Sam and Clara was only beginning, and the bond forming between them was strong enough to withstand whatever the Wild West could throw their way. Winter had begun its slow march across the ranch, bringing with it cold winds, icy mornings, and snow that blanketed the hills and pastures. Sam and Clara woke each day to frost covering the ground, their breath visible in the chill air. The work became more demanding than ever. Feeding the cattle took longer, water troughs often froze overnight, and the fences had to be checked constantly to ensure no animals wandered off into dangerous areas. Despite the cold, both of them worked side by side, their breath visible in the crisp air as they tackled each task together. The harshness of the season made their companionship even more valuable. One morning, Sam noticed that Clara had stayed out later than usual, carefully breaking ice in the water troughs. He approached her quietly, his boots crunching in the thin layer of frost on the ground. "You don't have to do all this by yourself," he said, though there was no anger in his voice, only concern. Clara smiled faintly, brushing snow off her coat. "I know, but I like making sure everything is done right," she replied. Sam studied her for a moment, admiration in his eyes. Her dedication never failed to impress him, and he realized how much her determination reminded him of his own father's work ethic. As the days grew colder, the challenges increased. A sudden blizzard struck one afternoon, the wind howling across the ranch, carrying with it sharp snow that stung any exposed skin. Sam and Clara struggled to secure the animals, bringing them into sheltered areas and reinforcing weakened fences. The storm was relentless, and they had to fight against it at every step. Clara's hands were red and raw from the cold, yet she did not complain. Sam, noticing her discomfort, offered his gloves, which she accepted with a grateful smile. Their teamwork during the storm was seamless, almost instinctive, each knowing what the other needed without speaking. It was in moments like these that their bond grew stronger, forged in the shared effort and the challenges of life on the ranch. That night, trapped inside the cabin by the storm, Sam and Clara found themselves sitting close to the fire, the warmth of the flames contrasting sharply with the freezing cold outside. Silence fell between them, broken only by the occasional crackle of burning wood. Sam, usually reserved with his feelings, found it impossible to ignore the connection he felt. He looked at Clara, noticing the way the firelight highlighted the determination in her eyes. "Clara," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "these past weeks I've realized something." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames, waiting patiently for him to continue. I care about you more than I expected," Sam admitted. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Clara's expression softened, a mix of surprise and relief crossing her face. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "I've grown to trust you, and I care about you too." The acknowledgement of their feelings changed the room in an instant. The tension that had existed before, uncertain and unspoken, shifted into something deeper, something undeniable. They had faced storms, long days, and the harshness of the land together, and now they realized their hearts were tied in ways they could no longer ignore. The blizzard continued outside, but inside the cabin, a new warmth spread between them. They spoke softly, sharing hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. Sam admitted that he had long wondered what it would be like to have someone beside him on the ranch, someone who understood not just the work, but the life he had built. Clara spoke of the loneliness she had felt traveling from town to town, and how rare it was to find someone she could trust completely. Each word they exchanged brought them closer, reinforcing the bond that had formed over weeks of shared effort and mutual respect. Over the next few days, the snow began to settle, leaving the ranch covered in a thick white blanket. Life became both more difficult and more beautiful. The frozen landscape was harsh and unyielding, but it also had a quiet, breathtaking beauty. Sam and Clara continued their daily routines, now working even more closely together. She learned to anticipate his actions. He began to rely on her judgment, and both of them realized that their partnership went beyond mere friendship. There was trust, respect, and now a budding love that neither could deny. One particularly cold afternoon, a problem arose with the herd. A small group of calves had wandered too close to the edge of the snowy fields, near a steep drop. Sam and Clara acted immediately, coordinating their movements to guide the calves to safety. Clara's voice was calm but firm, directing the animals while Sam worked to clear obstacles from their path. Their teamwork was flawless, a silent understanding passing between them with each gesture. When the last calf was safely returned to the herd, Sam felt a surge of admiration for Clara. Her courage and quick thinking had saved the animals, and in that moment he realized how deeply he had come to rely on her presence and strength. As the night fell, Sam and Clara sat once again by the fire, exhausted but satisfied. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world quiet and still. Sam reached over and took Clara's hand, holding it gently in his own. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly closer, her eyes meeting his. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Clara's lips curved into a soft smile. "We make a good team," she replied. "I've never felt this connected to anyone before." The simple admission, shared in the quiet warmth of the cabin, sealed their understanding. Their bond had grown through work, challenges, and shared moments, and now it had transformed into something deeper, something that would shape the rest of their lives. The blizzard had brought them closer, but it had also shown them the vulnerability and reliance they now shared. They were no longer just companions on the ranch. They were partners in every sense of the word. Each day, each task, each moment of shared effort reinforced the growing love between them. Sam, who had long been solitary and guarded, found himself opening his heart in ways he never expected. Clara, who had traveled alone and faced countless hardships, found a sense of home and belonging she had never known. As winter stretched on, their connection became more apparent to the few townsfolk who occasionally visited. They noticed the way Sam and Clara moved together, how they shared responsibilities without needing to speak, and the subtle warmth in their interactions. While the outside world remained harsh and unforgiving, the ranch had become a place of safety, trust, and growing affection. Sam and Clara's relationship was not built on grand gestures or sudden declarations. It was built on everyday moments, on shared effort, and on the quiet understanding that they could rely on each other completely. One evening, after a particularly long day of feeding and checking the cattle, Sam invited Clara to walk with him through the fields, now covered in a thin layer of frost. The sky was painted with the soft pinks and purples of sunset, and the air was crisp and still. They walked side by side, their footsteps crunching in the snow, speaking quietly about the tasks ahead and the dreams they held for the ranch. Sam stopped for a moment, turning to face Clara. "I want you to know," he said, his voice steady but gentle, "that I don't just trust you with the work, I trust you with my life." Clara's eyes softened and she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "And I trust you," she replied, "more than I ever thought I could." That night, as the fire burned low and the world outside was blanketed in white, Sam and Clara settled into their usual corners of the cabin. Sleep came easily, but both of them were aware of the bond that had grown between them. They had faced the harshness of winter, the challenges of the land, and the demands of ranch life, and through it all, they had discovered something rare and precious: mutual respect, trust, and love. Their relationship had reached a turning point. It was no longer just companionship. It was the foundation for a future they could build together. The coming weeks promised more work, more challenges, and more opportunities to test their bond. Yet, Sam and Clara faced the future with confidence, knowing that they were stronger together than apart. The winter had taught them not just resilience but the importance of partnership, the value of trust, and the quiet strength of love that grows steadily over time. The hardships had not driven them apart. Instead, they had drawn them closer, creating a connection that neither could ignore. And so, as the cabin settled into the quiet of the night, with the wind whispering through the trees and snow glistening under the moonlight, Sam and Clara slept peacefully. They had faced storms, hardships, and the unforgiving elements of the Wild West together, and in doing so, they had discovered a love that was patient, enduring, and true. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time, both of them understood that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Spring had finally returned to the ranch. The snow melted slowly, revealing the fresh green of new grass and the first wildflowers of the season. The air was warmer, carrying the scent of wet earth and blooming plants. Birds returned to the trees, their songs filling the quiet mornings, and the ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't during the harsh winter months. Sam and Clara were busy as ever, caring for the cattle, repairing fences, and planting new crops, but there was a lightness in their steps that reflected the change in the season, and in their hearts. The winter had strengthened their bond, turning their companionship into a deep and enduring trust. Sam had come to rely on Clara in every way, not just in work but in life itself. He valued her judgment, her courage, and the comfort her presence brought to his once lonely cabin. Clara, in turn, had found a sense of home she had never known, a place where she was not only needed but respected and cherished. Their days were filled with the rhythm of ranch life, but now each task carried an undercurrent of affection, each shared glance a reminder of the love that had quietly grown between them. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Sam suggested they take a walk through the fields. Clara agreed, enjoying the feeling of fresh spring air on her face. They walked side by side, their boots leaving prints in the soft soil, talking quietly about plans for the ranch and the coming season. Sam stopped at a small hill overlooking the property, a place where the view stretched across the pastures and rolling hills beyond. He turned to Clara, his expression serious but warm. "I've been thinking about us," he said softly. Clara looked up at him, curiosity and anticipation in her eyes. "I feel the same," she replied. "I've thought about it too." Sam took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. He had spent years managing the ranch alone, and the idea of sharing his life with someone had been both exciting and frightening. But with Clara, it felt natural, right, and impossible to ignore. "Clara," he said, reaching for her hand, "I want you to be with me, not just here on the ranch, but in my life. Will you marry me?" Clara's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and joy flooding her face. She felt the truth of his words in her heart. "Yes," she whispered, tears of happiness forming in her eyes. "Yes, Sam, I will." The moment was simple but perfect. They stood together, holding hands as the morning sun cast golden light across the fields, a symbol of the new life they were beginning together. The connection they had built through weeks of hard work, shared challenges, and quiet moments had transformed into a commitment that neither of them would ever take lightly. It was a bond rooted in trust, respect, and a love that had grown steadily, patiently, and surely. The days leading up to their wedding were filled with preparation and excitement. Sam and Clara worked side by side, not just on the ranch but also planning for their future. They repaired old fences, painted the barn, and prepared a small space for their home together. Their friends from the nearby town offered help, bringing food, decorations, and supplies for the celebration. It was a simple gathering, in keeping with the lives they led, but every detail was filled with thought and care, a reflection of their shared values and the life they had built together. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue with just a few wispy clouds. The pastures were alive with color, wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. Sam stood near the barn, dressed in his best shirt and boots, his heart pounding with anticipation. Clara appeared, wearing a simple but elegant dress that reflected her natural beauty. Sam froze for a moment, the memory of the first time he had seen her during that storm returning vividly. She smiled at him, and in that smile he saw every hardship they had overcome, every moment they had shared, and every hope for the future they would build together. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Their friends from the town gathered around, some standing on the soft grass, others sitting on benches, all witnessing the union of two people who had found love through trust, perseverance, and shared experience. The vows they exchanged were sincere, reflecting their journey rather than grandiose promises. Sam spoke of respect, partnership, and his commitment to care for Clara every day of their lives. Clara spoke of trust, gratitude, and the joy of finding a true home not just in a place, but in the person standing beside her. As they were pronounced husband and wife, the applause of their friends echoed across the fields. Sam and Clara embraced, feeling the weight of the past months lift, replaced with a sense of hope and joy. The land around them, the ranch they had worked so hard to protect, seemed to celebrate along with them. The wind carried the scent of spring blossoms, the gentle rustle of leaves creating a perfect soundtrack to their new beginning. Life on the ranch after the wedding continued as it had before, filled with work and the demands of managing the land, but now it carried a new layer of warmth and fulfillment. Sam and Clara faced each day together, their love guiding their decisions, their trust strengthening their partnership. They celebrated small victories, like a healthy herd of calves or a successful harvest, and comforted each other during challenges, whether it was harsh weather or unexpected setbacks. Their relationship was grounded in reality, built on shared effort, respect, and the quiet understanding that they were stronger together than apart. Evenings at the cabin were filled with small moments of intimacy and joy. They cooked meals together, shared stories by the fire, and often sat outside under the stars, talking about the future. Sometimes they simply held hands in silence, appreciating the quiet presence of each other after a long day. The ranch, once a place of solitude and hard labor for Sam, had become a home filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Clara's arrival during that storm had transformed not just his life, but the very essence of the ranch itself. Their love continued to grow with each passing season. Summer brought long days of work in the fields and evenings of shared stories around the fire. Fall painted the hills in shades of orange and gold, reminding them of the cycles of life and the importance of nurturing what they had built together. And each winter, no matter how harsh, they faced it side by side, their bond stronger for every challenge. The memories of that first storm, of the moment they met, and the way they had worked together through hardships, remained vivid reminders of the foundation upon which their love had been built. As the years passed, Sam and Clara became more than just partners on the ranch. They became family, friends, and confidants to each other. Their love was quiet but enduring, a steady flame that weathered every storm, both literal and figurative. The townsfolk of Redstone often remarked on the bond between the rancher and the woman who had arrived during a storm, amazed at how their connection had blossomed into a lasting partnership. But to Sam and Clara, it was never a story of surprise or luck. It was the natural outcome of trust, respect, and shared effort, of two people meeting at the right moment and choosing to build a life together. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the hills, Sam and Clara stood on the porch of their cabin, looking out at the land that had witnessed the growth of their love. Sam wrapped an arm around Clara's shoulder, and she leaned into him, their hands intertwined. "I can't imagine life any other way," Clara whispered. Sam nodded, feeling the truth of her words in his heart. "Neither can I," he replied. "We've built this together every day, every moment." And so life on the ranch continued, filled with work, challenges, joy, and love. Sam and Clara's story was one of resilience, trust, and partnership. From the moment Clara first stepped into the cabin during that storm, neither could have imagined the journey that lay ahead, a journey that would transform two lives, create a home, and bring a love that was steadfast, enduring, and true. The Wild West, with all its hardships and beauty, had been the backdrop for a love story that was simple, real, and unforgettable. Their story was a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections come from unexpected beginnings, from shared struggles, and from the courage to open one's heart. Sam and Clara had found that in each other, And their life together, built on trust, respect, and love, became the enduring testament to the power of partnership in even the harshest landscapes. And as the sun set over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields, they stood together, ready to face the future, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as one.